Good morning everyone and welcome to the Cabinet meeting. I'm Councillor Amanda Hopgood, Leader of Durham County Council and Chair of this meeting. Before we begin our meeting today, our thoughts continue to be with the Royal Family following the passing of Her Majesty the Queen. I'd like to ask you all to remember Her Majesty as we begin our meeting by standing and observing 1 minute silence. Thank you. The meeting is being broadcast live through our YouTube channel, so before we commence with today's formal business, I'd like to cover some of the housekeeping issues for us to follow. So if everyone could please switch off or make silent your mobile phones and keep microphones switched off at all times unless invited to speak by myself as the Chair. When invited to speak, please switch on your microphone nearest to you and introduce yourself. So with that, we'll move on to the agenda. Item 1 is public questions. We haven't received any questions for this part of today's meeting. Item 2, the minutes. Can I have a mover and seconder, please, for the minutes of the meeting on the 13th of July?
Move it, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor
Second that, Chair.
And Councillor Henderson to second. Can we agree the minutes as a true record? Agreed. Okay, I can confirm, therefore, that the minutes have been agreed. Item 3, declarations of interest. Are there any declarations from any members this morning? No. Item 4, providing a sustainable solution for Durham Community Business College, part of the former Durham Federation. Can I please ask John Pearce, Corporate Director of Children and Young People's Services, to present the report?
Thank you, Chair. John Pearce, Corporate Director, Children and Young People's Services. So the report sets out a proposal to enable a sustainable future for Durham Community Business College, known as DCBC. It asks for approval to write off the accumulated deficit for the school at the point of transfer to an academy status, which is proposed to happen in January 2023, if agreed by Cabinet. It's estimated the deficit at this point will be in the region of 570,000 to 650,000, with the cost to be met from an earmarked reserve established for this purpose. This projection may be impacted by the inflationary pressures currently faced by all schools. DCBC became part of the Durham Federation in 2009, along with Findune Community College. It's had a very challenging time since 2014, when both schools in the Federation were rated inadequate by Ofsted. As a result of the Ofsted judgment, a Directive Academy order was opposed by the Department for Education, and an Academy Trust, Bright Tribe, were identified by DFE as the proposed sponsor, who then took on the running of the Federation. In 2016, following very significant concerns being raised nationally about Bright Tribe, all schools were removed from its trust. Pupil numbers had already started to fall across both schools in the Federation following the 2014 inspection, and this was further accelerated by the issues with the academisation process and a range of leadership challenges. Following the removal of Bright Tribe, the DFE failed to secure another sponsor, and as a result, Durham Federation reverted to local authority control in 2018. A requirement of this process was the consolidation of the Federation onto a single school site. The amalgamation of the two schools and the consolidation onto the DCBC site was completed in April 2021 following a statutory consultation process. The school has operated with a licence deficit for 3 years, making significant reductions in spending to limit the accumulated deficit. However, pupil numbers have continued to fall, and it is not sustainable to reduce spending further without significantly compromising the quality of education. For the Council to meet its statutory duty in relation to sufficiency of school places, it is essential that DCBC has a sustainable future. All of the secondary schools within the place planning area are oversubscribed, and a thriving DCBC will be a critical part of meeting future demand for secondary places. Following conversations with the Department for Education, a Durham-based multi-academy trust, the Advanced Learning Partnership, has provisionally expressed an interest in taking DCBC into their trust. However, this can only be achieved as support is provided to ensure financial sustainability as part of the transition. The Department for Education is supportive of the proposal, and they are prepared to commit national funding and financial support to enable the transition of the school into Advanced Learning Partnership and support it becoming sustainable for the future. The Council has a strong track record of working with local trusts to secure improved educational outcomes and increase pupil numbers. And this has been done in other cases by supporting transition through deficit write-off in this way. And the report proposes that we do the same for DCBC. In conclusion, officers believe the recommendation provides the best option to secure education provision of children living in the area, and also for the Council to meet our duties under sufficiency of school places for secondary education in that area. The recommendation to Cabinet is set out in paragraph 11 of the report. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Jan. Can I invite Councillor Ted Henderson, Cabinet Portfolio Holder for Children and Young People's Services, to speak to the report, please?
Thank you, Chair. As you've said, I'm Councillor Ted Henderson, the Cabinet Portfolio Holder for Children and Young People. The plan set out within this report would see the schools join in an established multi-academy trust, with the Council contributing to this by writing off the school's current budget deficiency. The Council has a strong, effective working relationship with the proposed trust and has worked successfully with the organisation in the past. The Department of Education is supportive of the proposals, identifying the need to preserve pupil places within the Durham Central Planning. They have committed to provide additional financial assistance to improve school buildings and support the transfer. This will be a great benefit to the children and the community. This will deliver a financially viable solution for the school's future, improve the educational standards and secure further growth in the pupil amount. The growth of the school will allow all pupils to benefit from a wide curriculum and increased staffing levels, which will support more specialist teaching across all subjects. All of this will provide better education outcomes for the children. For these reasons, I would like to propose the Cabinet support the recommendation to write off the accumulated deficit for DCBC at the point of conversion. Thank you.
Thanks, Ted. Can I invite Councillor Richard Bell, Deputy Leader and Cabinet Portfolio Holder for Finance, to speak to the report, please?
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Bell, Deputy Leader and Portfolio Holder for Finance. Can I thank the officers for bringing this report forward? As we've heard, the pressure on places means that we need the capacity in this pupil planning area and cannot afford to lose this school. But without action, there is the prospect for significant deficits to be built up over the coming years. By joining the Advanced Learning Partnership, who can significantly impact on parental preferences, and with the financial support that it will receive from the Department through the Department for Education, I believe the school will go from strength to strength post-transfer. Decisions to write off deficits are not to be taken lightly, but just as the Council has done so in the past with Peterlee, St Bede's, Tanfield and Wolseley to facilitate transfer, so we must also now for the Durham Community Business School. The deficit of the point of transfer, which is expected to be January 2023, is difficult to accurately determine at this stage, but is estimated to be up to £650,000. The deal to broker the transfer with the support to be provided to the Advanced Learning Partnership in the short term is unique, but then again the circumstances we face in this case are unique, with the Council required to take the school back on following the failure of the former Durham Federation and the inability to find a sponsor previously for the Trust. The finance and education teams will continue to work closely with the school up to the point of transfer, and I will liaise with the Corporate Director of Resources in terms of finalising the value of the deficit write-off at the time of conversion. With that, Chair, I'm happy to second the report and ask Cabinet to endorse the recommendations as set out at paragraphs 11A to C.
Thank you. Is there anyone else wishing to speak to the report? Okay, can we agree the report and its recommendations? Okay, I can confirm that the recommendations are agreed. Item 5, Quarter 1, 2022-23 Performance Management Report. Can I ask Paul Darby, Corporate Director of Resources, to present the report, please?
Thank you, Chair, and good morning. Paul Darby, Corporate Director of Resources. This report sets out details of progress towards the targets and actions set out in the corporate plan, agreed by County Council in June, and is based on the position to the 30th of June. Members will see that the report format and structure has been amended, but as usual, it does include an overview of state of the county issues of significance, which are linked to the achievement of the county vision, aims and objectives, and to which the Council has a role, but not overall ownership in terms of delivery and progress towards the targets and actions in the Council plan. There's a comprehensive list of performance indicators attached to the report, with comparisons provided against the same point last year and against this position to the 30th of June 2019, which is the pre-pandemic level of performance, to aid context. There is a summary table at paragraph 69 showing the direction of travel in terms of performance against the various performance indicators set out in the corporate plan, both against the position to 30th of June and pre-pandemic levels of performance. As members will appreciate, the recovery from the pandemic is still ongoing, and its legacy is having a significant ongoing impact on our performance across a number of areas. The report highlights the impact of the cost of living crisis on ourselves, our communities, and on local businesses. The actual performance report is attached at Appendix 2 to the report, and the recovery report pulls out some of the key highlights. As members will see, for each of the 5 thematic areas of our council plan, covering our economy, our council, our environment, our people and our communities, we have set out areas that are going well, areas which require attention, and areas of issues to note. The revised format is hopefully a more accessible and helpful way of presenting our performance data. There are a number of areas to note, things that have happened that were not factored into the council plan, and these are set out at paragraphs 55 to 66 in the covering report. The issues and performance data presented in this report will be reported to the thematic overview and scrutiny committees in the coming weeks, where there will be a chance for a more in-depth analysis of the council's performance. The recommendations members are set out at paragraph 15, which are for Cabinet to note the report. Thank you.
Thanks, Paul. So can I thank Paul and his team for this detailed and comprehensive update on our performance against the targets and actions set out in the council plan. I'd also like to thank the team for the new style and format of the report. It's much more focused and easier to get a rounded picture of our performance as a council. Clearly, our performance in some areas is still being impacted by the recovery from the pandemic and more recently the increase in the cost of living. In terms of those areas where we are performing well, I was pleased to note that unemployment continues to fall, represented by sustained reductions in the numbers of people claiming unemployment benefits. Business Durham's property rental portfolio is 97% occupied. It's the greatest occupancy we have seen since it started. The visitor economy has continued to grow post-pandemic, visitors increasing by 38% and money generated by these increasing by 61%. 94% of 3- and 4-year-olds are receiving their free education entitlement, and air quality in Durham City has improved. Our cleanliness surveys show improvements across the board and are now meeting targets. And during the quarter, we adopted our second climate emergency response plan, and that we are now working towards a 2045 net zero target. There's been an improvement in the percentage of women still breastfeeding after 6 to 8 weeks, and 89% of the people supported through the reablement service remain in their home 91 days after discharge from hospital. Gym and swim memberships have increased by 16% in comparison to last year, and 536 affordable housing units were built in 2021-22 compared to 478 in 2020-21. Fly tipping incidents overall have declined, and our enforcement rate for fly tipping is 49%. The PDR rollout continues following the reinstatement in Q3 last year, and at the end of Q1, 100% of leaders, 88% of managers and 65% of core employees who have access to the electronic system have had their annual PDR. We've also welcomed 61 new apprentices who've recently been recruited and started their employment. This report, however, does also highlight a number of areas requiring attention, where for a range of issues our performance has not been what we would have liked it to be. And in terms of areas requiring attention, where I know action is and will continue to be taken, I would note the following. The impact of the inflationary pressures and the squeeze on living standards due to the cost of living is a major area for concern, and this is manifesting itself in increased demand for welfare assistance, discretionary housing payments and assistance with home energy and fuel debt. The quantity of waste collected remains 8% higher than pre-pandemic levels, but in line with the revised budget levels we set in 2022-23. And I know we are doing a lot to promote waste reduction and increase recycling. It is encouraging to see the percentage of recycling contamination coming down and improving, and I'd like to thank our workforce for the work that's been put in there. Based on the latest survey, just under 41% of carers are satisfied with the support and services they receive. This reduction in satisfaction is being experienced right across the country. Whilst the performance and outcomes from the reablement service are encouraging, as I mentioned earlier, the percentage of people receiving this service has reduced across the last quarter. Our looked after children caseloads have increased, and the costs associated with meeting that demand are manifesting themselves in overspends against the placement budget, which at Q1 is forecast to overspend by 5.39 million, putting increased pressure into the MTFP. We continue to see high demand for education, health and social care plans, which is continuing to place pressure on our high needs DSG budget. There has been an increase in nuisance and personal antisocial behaviour reported incidents, which is masked by a reduction in environmental antisocial behaviour reported incidents. And staff turnover rates have increased, as has sickness absence per full-time equivalent, which has now returned to pre-pandemic levels once COVID-19 related absences are excluded. And absences linked to mental health and fatigue are 10% higher than pre-pandemic levels. We have started to see increased volumes of new claims for council tax reduction and increases in the number of changes in circumstances, at a time when the teams have had to accommodate new additional work to process the council tax energy rebate schemes and close off the various business grants and relief schemes. Processing times have therefore suffered. There are a number of areas to note, things that have happened that were not factored into the council plan but are of note and interest to Cabinet. These, as mentioned by Paul, are set out in paragraphs 55 to 66 in the covering report, and I welcome the additional context and colour that this brings to the report. With that, I propose that Cabinet note the recommendations set out in paragraph 15, which is that Cabinet note the report. The recommendation is for noting, so it doesn't require a seconder. However, is there anyone wishing to speak to the report? Okay. Can we agree to note the report, please? Okay, I can confirm the report is noted. Item 6, forecast of revenue and capital outturn 2022-23, period to the 30th of June 2022, and update on progress towards achieving MTFP 12 savings. Can I ask Paul Darby, Corporate Director of Resources, to present the report, please?
Morning, thank you, Chair. This report presents Cabinet with the Q1 revenue and capital outturn based on the position to the 30th of June. It's the first in-year budgetary control report presented for 22-23, and including in the report are details of the forecast reserves and balances that will be held at the end of this financial year at the 31st of March 23. The report also includes forecasts for both the council tax and the business rates collection funds, and a forecast outturn against the various blocks of the dedicated schools grant, including the estimated year-end position in terms of our maintained schools retained balances. As members will see, the forecasts are dominated by the impact of inflation, which is outstripping the budget provision across a number of areas, both pay and price inflation, with significant pressures being faced in our energy budgets, with fuel costs and the impact of CPI-linked contracts, particularly in waste and transport, resulting in large overspends. I would like to say the forecasts are a worst-case scenario, but they are potentially not. Energy prices remain extremely volatile at this time, and there are a number of areas where costs could still escalate as we get deeper into the financial year. Last week, the government did announce a package of measures to support households and businesses with the escalating energy costs. Whilst the capping of household bills for the next 2 years appears clearer, we await further detail on how the support to businesses will work and the impact it will have on the council, although it would appear that the support is only committed for 6 months at this stage. The more worrying factor is that these pressures outlined in this report will in many respects continue and carry over into next year and impact on our medium-term financial plan. The Consumer Price Index could well be still around 9 or 10% this time next year, and the combined impact of these inflationary pressures, including increases in the bank base rates, potential impacts arising from the fair cost of care exercise we're undertaking at present, and the overspend on looked after children placements means that our MTFP forecasts that we presented in July are now significantly worse than when we considered them back in July, and will be an update report provided to Cabinet in October. The report also flags the continued impact of COVID-19 on our leisure income and on our waste tonnages. We continue to closely monitor these budgets post-COVID to track activity to see whether and when it returns to pre-pandemic levels. As members will see, the Q1 forecasts factor in the pay offer made by the local government employers at the end of July, which would see a flat £1,925 pay award to our employees. This would present a higher increase for lower paid staff than was provided for in the budget, and on average would see the council's pay bill rise by 6.6% this year, significantly higher than the 3.25% budget provision, and result in an overspend in the region of £6.5 million this year, and a significant ongoing pressure into 23-24. In overall terms, before we adjust for sums that will be picked up from the £10 million earmarked reserve we set aside as part of the final accounts close down to fund the expected inflationary pressures this year, before we apply, and after we apply the contingency budget, our service groupings are forecast to overspend by around £19.2 million. Once we exclude £14.1 million of unavoidable inflationary pressures linked to energy, fuel, waste and transport that will be picked up corporately, the service grouping's net cash limit overspend reduces to just over £5 million. With the exception of adult and health services, all of our service groupings are reporting a net cash limit overspending year, the most significant of which relates to children and young people services, where, as I mentioned, looked after children costs continue to outstrip the budget provision, despite the growth factored into the budget in MTFP 12. Children and young people services are forecast to be overspent by a net £4.9 million this year, when contained within this is an overspend of £5.3 million on looked after children placements. Details of the cash limit forecast for each service grouping are outlined in detail at sections 49 to 84 of the report. Members will see at section 34 to 39 we also set out details of the £14.1 million of costs we've treated as outside the cash limit and met corporately, funded from contingencies and application of the earmarked reserve we set aside. The more significant items relate to adjustments for the pay award, both last year and this, and the table of paragraph 41 shows the overspends being excluded from each service grouping. Members will see that in terms of the COVID costs, we've treated the loss of leisure centre income and catering income in our admin buildings as outside the cash limit. Details of the sum treated outside the cash limit are set out at paragraph 43. The forecast cash limit and general reserves position is set out at paragraph 46 in the report, where the cash limit reserves at the 31st of March 23 are forecast to be 8.4 million and the general reserve is forecast to be 21.5 million. The forecast for the general reserve is that it will fall below the minimum value set out in our reserves policy agreed by County Council in February this year. Corporate costs are forecast to be around £100,000 under budget, and we are reporting a £2.5 million underspend against the central capital financing budgets following a review which has been ongoing of our capital financing arrangements and budgets. With the increase in base rates over recent months, allied with our higher than usual cash balances, there is a forecast overachievement in our investment income, which is forecast to be around £2 million higher than the budget provision. The table of paragraph 89 shows our overall net debt position and our overall debt and investment position at the 30th of June compared to the position at the 31st of March. Appendix 4, as usual, contains details of all of the earmarked reserves and balances, and we have split these, as we have done for the last few quarters, between sums held corporately, grants and sums held on behalf of third parties, and sums held by services for specific purposes. Excluding schools, earmarked reserves are forecast to reduce by £42.3 million this year to just over £193 million at the 31st of March 2023. Paragraphs 90 to 93 of the report provide a summary of this position. We will need to carefully reflect on our reserves position as we progress our 2023-24 and MTFP 13 budget planning. The DSG position is covered in sections 94 to 109 of the report, which provides a detailed forecast of the position for the dedicated school grant, including the high needs SEND allocations, our schools block and our early years block. Our schools are facing the same inflationary pressures as the council is. A separate report on today's agenda provides details of the school's budget setting process, where in summary, in setting their budgets this year, our maintained schools budgeted to use £7.3 million of their retained balances to balance the budgets. 2 schools were given permission to set a licence deficit budget this year. However, the latest forecast would indicate that due to a combination of pay and price inflation, our maintained schools may have to draw on their reserves to the tune of around £17 million this year. This will mean many more of our schools will struggle to set a balanced budget next year, and summary details of the budget pressures being faced by our schools are set out at paragraph 99. The high needs DSG forecast is that spend will be contained within the budget at this stage, with a forecast £200,000 underspend anticipated. This is significantly less than the estimates that we were reporting to Cabinet earlier this year and reflects the inflationary pressures being faced in the high needs DSG block also. This area of the budget continues to be monitored closely, and a further update will be provided at Q2 and Q3, particularly as the position on top of funding for mainstream schools is finalised. The early years DSG forecast outturn is that spend will be contained within the budget at this stage. The report does include details of the forecast capital programme outturn from paragraph 110 onwards, including details of the revisions to the capital programme to reflect reprofiling, including carry forward of underspends from last year and slippage to future years, as well as additional grant received and other adjustments. The forecasts do not at this stage include any reprofiling as we get deeper into the year based on capacity to deliver on the capital programme. Members will see that the total capital expenditure at this stage amounts to just over £255 million, and to the 30th of June we'd spent around £28.4 million of capital expenditure. Details of how the capital programme is to be financed is set out at paragraph 115, and in paragraphs 113 and 114 there's a summary of the details of the adjustments to the capital programme which have been actioned based on discussions with the Capital Member Officer Working Group. In terms of the collection funds, the report includes details of the forecast outturn position for both council tax and business rates, and they're set out from paragraph 116 onwards. The outturn forecasts are complex and difficult to explain due to the accounting treatment of government support towards the 2021 financial year end position due to the COVID-19 pandemic. There is, however, an in-year surplus forecast on the council tax collection fund of just under £500,000, but when we take into account the undeclared deficit carried forward from last year, and after adjusting for government support available which is spread over 3 years, there is a £2 million forecast deficit on the council tax collection fund to the year end. The council's share of that deficit would be £1.7 million. The outturn position for business rates, however, it shows an in-year deficit of £3.7 million, which relates to retail release, which were actioned after the budget was set, for which will be compensated for by way of Section 31 grant. When we offset the surplus brought forward from last year and the receipt of the Section 31 grant, there's a forecast surplus on across all of the funds of around £840,000. Finally, Chair, at paragraph 144 onwards, there is a summary of progress towards achievement of the savings that were factored in the budgets of £2.4 million, where at the end of June, 79% of those savings have been delivered, and there's an update at paragraph 148 onwards in terms of the HR implications of those savings. The recommendation, Chair, is set out at paragraph 24.
Thanks, Paul. Can I invite Councillor Richard Bell, Deputy Leader and Cabinet Portfolio Holder for Finance, to speak to the report, please?
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to commend the officers for a comprehensive and thorough report and thank budget managers across the Council for their continuing efforts to manage our resources during difficult financial circumstances. The COVID-19 pandemic continues to cast a shadow over our financial performance, with continuing pressure on leisure centre income in particular. Like everyone else, we also now face significant inflationary pressures, the likes of which we have not seen for over 40 years, and largely driven by the ongoing conflict in Ukraine and the disruption to the world economy caused by COVID. This is creating overspends across a range of areas, particularly in our energy budgets, and resulting in higher than anticipated pay awards this year. These pressures will not impact just on this year's outturn, but on our budget planning for next year. Apart from adult and health services, all other services are forecast to overspend against their cash limit budgets this year, despite any ongoing COVID-related pressures and the inflationary pressures linked to pay and price inflation being treated as outside the cash limit. The net cash limit overspend for all services is forecast to be £5.1 million this year, with significant budget pressures in children and young people's services totalling £4.9 million, relating once again primarily to a forecast overspend in our looked after children budget of around £5.4 million this year. We will need to reflect on this in terms of our MTFP 13 update next month, where it is safe to say that the position reported in July has deteriorated and the challenge in terms of balancing our budgets has increased. We will need to rely upon our reserves this year to finance any overspend, but this is not a sustainable long-term position. The report identifies that over £14 million of COVID and inflationary pressures have been treated as outside the cash limit and met corporately, funded from a contribution of corporate contingencies and the earmarked reserve we set aside as part of closing the accounts in anticipation of this position. The £10 million earmarked reserve we set aside will be fully utilised, and there will be a need now to draw on our general reserves in the year, taking this down below the minimum threshold set out in our reserve strategy for the first time. Overall, excluding schools balances, our reserves are forecast to fall by just over £42 million this year. There remains uncertainty over our financial settlement from government for next year and into future years, with the expected consultation on a 2-year settlement having been further delayed. The budget pressures we are facing are beyond our control, and it is important that government recognises this and provides us with the resources necessary so that we can plan effectively. We have therefore called on the government to increase local government funding next year in recognition of the unprecedented and unavoidable pressures we are facing. Last week, I wrote to the new Prime Minister and Chancellor of the Exchequer to highlight the significant financial strain on the Council and the wider sector, and call on the Government to do more by way of financial support. We can only hope that our voice and the voice of the sector is heard at a time of significant pressure on the public finances. The forecast cash limit, general reserves and earmark position, although forecast to reduce to the year end, still demonstrates our relatively strong financial standing, which I would venture is better than most councils. In terms of the collection fund forecasts, it is pleasing to note an in-year surplus is forecast on the council tax collection fund, and that the overall deficit, taking into account the deficit brought forward from last year, is offset by a forecast surplus on the business rates collection fund, taking into account the Section 31 grant we will receive for the various business rates reliefs that we have administered in the last year. The amended capital programme, taking into account budgets reprofiled from last year, new grants and contributions secured since we set the budget in February, and reprofiling into future years, results in a 22-23 capital programme of circa £256 million this year. I support the amendments made to the budget as outlined in the papers, but note that we will need to carefully manage these budgets going forward, considering the inflationary pressures we face and the ongoing MTFP challenges. Turning now to schools, as for our dedicated schools grant position, like the council, our maintained schools also face inflationary pressures that far outstrip the budget assumptions and DSG provision. The forecasts assume no further support is provided in year to offset, for example, the teachers' pay award and rising energy costs, and show an increased draw on maintained schools balances in year, up by £10 million from the initial budget estimates. Undoubtedly, there will be more schools that will find it difficult to balance their budgets next year unless additional funding is forthcoming. I welcome the modest forecast high needs DSG underspend forecast, but I am cautious and await with interest whether this will deteriorate once the outcome of the September top-up funding requests are worked through. In terms of delivery of MTFP savings this year, it's pleasing to note that a quarter of the way through the year, we have delivered around 79% of the £2.4 million of savings requirements for the year. In summary, Chair, the report identifies a range of budget pressures outside of our control that are placing huge pressures on the council budgets and on our maintained schools. It is because of our strong financial resilience that we can weather these pressures and meet them from reserves in year, but as I have said, that is not a sustainable position, and without additional funding from central government, we will face some difficult choices going forward as we consider the 23-24 budget and the MTFP 13 planning period. The Council will continue to exercise prudent financial management as we move forward, and we will meet those challenges and take whatever tough decisions are required. With that, Chair, I move the recommendations as set out in the report at paragraph 24, A to H. Thank you.
Thanks, Richard. Can I also add my thanks to those of Councillor Bells, to Paul and his team for what is a very detailed and comprehensive update on our financial performance. Accurately forecasting and keeping track of the finances in a council of this scale and complexity of ours is undoubtedly challenging, but managing our finances is a key issue for us, particularly at this time when the council is facing significant demand and cost pressures. Councillor Bell has covered a range of the issues and pressures that face the council, including those that face our schools as well. And with that, I am happy to second the recommendations as set out in the report, including the amendments to the capital programme as outlined. Is there anyone else wishes to speak to the report, please? Yes, Councillor Wilkes.
Thank you, Chair. Just briefly, we're a rural county with hundreds of villages spread across over 1,000 square miles of the North East, but we're not recognised as such by the government. And I've travelled all over the county over the last 16 months since we took over, and I can see the improvements on the ground that we're making. And I can also see the excellent work going on in every department within this council. But we're now dealing with inflation in some services running way above 10%. And as Councillor Bell has said, these are cost pressures not seen for generations. And if the government expects us to provide essential and indeed statutory services which residents need, it's got to help us. And this cannot be done by simply telling us to put up council tax for struggling residents. We need an increase in government funding, and we need to know urgently that help is on its way, both in year and for the coming financial year. We can't afford the usual delays from central government in confirming funding, and we need a response immediately. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Does anyone else wishes to speak? No. Can we agree the report and its recommendations, please?
Agreed.
Okay, I can confirm that the recommendations are agreed. Item 7 is the Corporate Parenting Panel Annual Report 2021-22. Can I ask John Pearce, Corporate Director of Children and Young People's Services, to present the report, please?
Thank you, Chair. Pleased to present the Corporate Parenting Annual Report for 21-22, which was agreed by the Corporate Parenting Panel at its meeting on the 19th of July. The report seeks the endorsement of Cabinet for the annual report, including the priorities it sets out for 22-23. Our young people have had a key role in developing and presenting the annual report, so it has an accessible and engaging format. The Council has a statutory duty for corporate parenting, and our work to support and enable children in care and care leavers to fulfil their potential is overseen by a highly effective Corporate Parenting Board. The Corporate Parenting Board operates as a champion for our children in care and care leavers and is chaired by Councillor Simmons, who will present this report to Council in September. It has extensive cross-party political involvement and engagement, representation from our Children in Care Council and a range of officers from across the Council. How we discharge our corporate parenting duties was a key part of our Ofsted inspection in May 2022, which recognised the excellent work of the board and included a range of praise for our corporate parenting activity. The annual report includes information on the role of the corporate parenting, a review of progress and achievements in 21-22, and the priorities that have been agreed for 22-23. The recommendation to Cabinet is set out in paragraph 6. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, John. Can I invite Councillor Ted Henderson, Cabinet Portfolio Holder for Children and Young People's Services, to speak to the report, please?
Thank you, Chair. It feels like it's my show this morning, or it should be between Paul and I. Right, the portfolio holder for this. I'd like to present the Corporate Parenting Panel report for 21-22 for endorsement. I love the quote used on this year's front page, which is so very true. Children are like boats and just need a little bit of guidance to go down the right path. As corporate parents, we have a duty to guide our young people and often ask ourselves these three key questions. If this was my child, would it be good enough? If this were my child, would it have been good enough? How would I make it better? I think the annual report that demonstrates our commitment to listen to the young people who are or have been in our care to make continuous changes and improvements to the service we provide. Young people from the Children Care Council helped to develop this report, and you will see that the two Children in Care Council representatives have included their own forwards. The annual report provides updates against the 2021-22 priorities, some of which have been challenging, as well as the priorities we will focus on for 22-23. I won't go through them all, but one of the key priorities is our use of the language we use with the children, the important use of words and the phrases that young people know and feel comfortable with. They understand this. This is personal to each young person, and their care plan now reflect their preference. The annual report includes a range of achievements, including young people delivering training to a range of professionals, including police, community support officers, to highlight the importance of child-focused and child-sensitive work. And this is now being shared to a broader range of officers with the Durham Constabulary. Although the recent Ofsted inspection fell outside the annual report timeframe, it is pleased to note that we are good and continue to move in the right direction with the impact of leaders on social work practicing being outstanding. Our corporate parenting strategy was also noted as ambitious. I would like to thank everyone for their work to support the children in our care. I move the recommendation set out in this report.
Thanks, Ted. Can I invite Councillor Chris Hood, Cabinet Portfolio Holder for Adult and Health Services, to speak to the report, please?
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Chris Hood, Cabinet Member for Adult and Health Services. As a member of the Corporate Parenting Panel and Portfolio Lead for Health, I am committed to achieving good outcomes for our young people, ensuring we address the issues that have the biggest impact on their health and well-being, particularly with ever-increasing financial pressures. I support the work of the Corporate Parenting Panel and welcome the involvement of the young people, and I am looking forward to the proposed development of a Young People Scrutiny Panel, whereby young people would ask questions, review services and make recommendations for improvement. I thank everyone involved in the development of the annual report and second the recommendations.
Thanks, Chris. Is there anyone else wishing to speak to the report? Can we agree the report and its recommendations, please?
Agreed.
Okay, can confirm that the recommendations are agreed. Item 8, Health and Care Integration. Can I ask Jane Robinson, Corporate Director of Adult and Health Services, to present the report, please?
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, everybody. Jane Robinson, Corporate Director for Adult and Health Services. This report updates Cabinet about potential changes to health and care integration and seeks agreement to a preferred option for discussion with health and care partners. Further reports will be presented to Cabinet following those discussions. The Council has worked with health and care partners for many years and since 2018 through the County Durham Care Partnership. This has put us in a good position to maximise the opportunities proposed in the Integration White Paper published in February 2022 and the Health and Care Act, which received Royal Assent in April 2022. The White Paper recognises the joint challenges facing health and social care, such as increasing demand, recruitment and retention of staff, and availability of resources to meet need. The White Paper suggests that the closer integration of health and care will go some way to address these challenges so that everyone receives the right care in the right place at the right time. The White Paper puts forward 5 options to promote integration at a place-based level. Place being defined as upper tier local authority areas, so for us that means the whole of County Durham. The Government has asked integrated care boards, which replaced clinical commissioning groups in July this year, to work with place-based partnerships to agree the best option for their area. A further request is that the place-based arrangements operate from April 2023. Following discussions, the County Durham Care Partnership has a preferred option of a joint committee for health and care in County Durham, and now wants to hold discussions with the Integrated Care Board about how this would work in detail, including what decisions and funding could be delegated to a County Durham level. The County Durham Care Partnership would want any joint committee to have direct lines of reporting and assurance to the Health and Wellbeing Board and Cabinet, as well as the Integrated Care Board. Oversight would be provided by our Overview and Scrutiny Committee arrangements. The joint committee could have a wide membership, including the voluntary sector, primary care and Health Watch, as well as the Council and NHS trusts. The functions of a joint committee would cover strategic planning, commissioning of some services, health and care leadership, commitment to a shared outcomes framework, development of the workforce and monitoring of quality. Council services in the scope of a joint committee would include adult social care, integrated commissioning, public health, children and young people services. Activities which contribute to the wider determinants of health, such as specialist housing, leisure and economic development, could also be part of a joint committee. As well as good governance, a major factor in a successful joint committee is clarity and agreement about financial arrangements. The integration white paper suggests changes will better support pooling health and care funding. We currently have shared budgets such as the Better Care Fund. However, following our discussions with the Integrated Care Board and partners, Cabinet will need to be assured that financial arrangements minimise risk and maximise the efficient and effective use of resources. The discussions will cover which budgets can be shared, how those shared budgets are set, agreed and monitored, how the financial arrangements comply with the Council's budget and policy framework and auditing systems, and how we manage budget pressures, underspends and overspends. To conclude, Chair, we have an opportunity to progress the integration of health and care in County Durham. We need to do this in discussions with the Integrated Care Board and our partners, focusing on the County Durham Care Partnership's preferred option of a joint committee. Those discussions will include the governance and financial arrangements for the joint committee, which will have lines of accountability to the Health and Wellbeing Board and Cabinet. We will bring further reports to Cabinet on the outcome of those discussions, with particular reference to the governance and financial arrangements. Chair, the recommendations are set out in paragraph 7 of the report.
Thanks, Jane. Can I invite Councillor Chris Hood, Cabinet Portfolio Holder for Adult and Health Services, to speak to the report, please?
Thank you, Chair. Our vision for integration is to bring together health and social care and voluntary organisations to achieve improved health and well-being for the people of County Durham. The important words in that vision statement are to achieve improved health and well-being for the people of County Durham, and the proposals in this report give us the opportunity to do that. We have a strong track record of joint working between health and social care in County Durham over many years. We have set up the County Durham Care Partnership to promote integration. We have joint posts, integrated teams and pool budgets. We manage the Better Care Fund together. Our approach to integration has developed as the needs of our residents have changed. What has remained constant is our concentration on County Durham as a distinct place. We know the strengths of our communities. We know the support they need to thrive and grow. We know how the Council, health partners and the voluntary sector can work together efficiently and effectively. I'm encouraged that the new Integrated Care Board, which replaced the County Durham Clinical Commissioning Group on the 1st of July 2022, has recognised the importance of working at a County Durham level. The Integrated Care Board is now ready to cooperate with the Council and our partners to agree the arrangements which we will have at a County Durham level to deliver the best health and care to our residents. The Government intends to give councils and our partners new flexibilities to extend integration. They have suggested 5 options for governance arrangements at a County Durham level to be up and running by April 2023. Our preferred option is to have a joint committee arrangement with a wide and inclusive membership. This joint committee will be linked closely with the Health and Wellbeing Board and be in the remit of our overview and scrutiny committees. The main function of the joint committee will be to arrange the best health and care for our residents, which shares our skilled workforce, our finance and our technology in the most efficient way. The report asks Cabinet for agreement to enter into discussions with the Integrated Care Board. Further reports will then be brought back to Cabinet, which will set out in more detail the role and function of a joint committee. Those further reports will also cover the governance arrangements for any pooled finances, how decisions will be made and how we will manage risks. I move the recommendations set out in the report.
Thanks, Chris. Can I invite Councillor Elizabeth Scott, Cabinet Portfolio Holder for Economy and Partnerships, to speak to the report, please?
Yes, thank you, Chair. The proposals in the report give us even greater opportunities to keep our residents healthy and well looked after. Some of our communities face long-term challenges to the health of residents, which can only be addressed in a joined-up way. Like so many areas, we have an ageing population whom we want to help to age well and lead active lives. We've seen increasingly complex requests for support from our children, young people and families. We know that good housing, leisure, education and jobs contribute to good health. We have to find innovative solutions across our healthcare system. That's why I'm pleased to see that any joint committee will have a wide membership, including public health and children and young people's services. Councillor Hood has rightly mentioned the need for good governance and sound financial management in a joint committee. I would also mention the opportunities we may have to share the skills of our workforce. Health and care providers are a major employer in County Durham. They have massively positive economic impact. By working together through a joint committee, we can use our collective economic strength to offer fulfilling, well-paid and highly skilled jobs. We know that people in good jobs are healthier. Finally, Chair, can I mention the importance of mental health and involving our voluntary sector partners? We have good relationships with the voluntary sector and they do excellent work, especially in promoting good mental health and well-being. I'm sure that we would want them to continue to be active partners. I second the recommendations set out in the report.
Thanks, Elizabeth. Is there anyone else wishing to speak to the report? Okay, can we agree the report and its recommendations?
Agreed.
Okay, I can confirm the recommendations are agreed. Item 9, the discharge of transport functions by Durham County Council 2021-22. Can I ask Amy Horhoff, Corporate Director of Regeneration, Economy and Growth, to present the report, please?
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, everybody. Amy Horhoff, Corporate Director of Regeneration, Economy and Growth. When the North East Combined Authority approved its constitution in April 2014, it delegated to Durham County Council transport functions contained in Parts 4 and 5 of the Transport Act 1985 and Parts 2 of the Transport Act 2000. These primarily relate to securing socially necessary bus services, concessionary travel and ticketing on local passenger services. During 2018, responsibility for the transport functions became vested in a statutory joint committee comprising of representatives of the new North of Tyne Combined Authority and the North East Combined Authority. It was agreed in a deed of corporation entered into by the 7 constituent councils that the transport functions delegated to the 2 counties in the area would remain the same pending any decision by a new joint committee. No changes have subsequently been made to the delegations. The Council is therefore required to report to the North East Joint Transport Committee annually on the discharge of the functions delegated to Durham County Council. Appendix 2 of this report, which will be presented to the North East Joint Transport Committee on the 18th of October 2022 and contains information in respect of the year April 2021 to March 2022. While this report is a note of the work carried out in 21-22, it presents the opportunity to highlight the progress in the last year under what we acknowledge to be a continued unprecedented circumstance for the public transport network. The pandemic clearly continues to have a major impact on the viability of public transport sector, and the report details the financial support and additional contracts that have been provided to try and sustain those services and support our communities. In summary, the report details the organisational arrangements within the Council in respect to passenger transport and describes the work carried out in relation to the bus network, including secured services, concessionary fares, school transport, the Council's response centre, public transport information including real-time information, and work on the regional bus service improvement plan and enhanced partnership. Chair, this report is concluded and it is to note. Thank you.
Thanks, Amy. Can I invite Councillor Elizabeth Scott, Cabinet Portfolio Holder for Economy and Partnerships, to speak, please?
Yes, thanks, Chair. As pointed out by Amy, this report is to inform Cabinet of the progress made by the Council between April 2021 and March 2022. While the report covers the extensive work undertaken over the year, there are some specific points that I would like to highlight. As the Cabinet Portfolio Holder for Economy and Partnerships, which includes responsibility for this area of transport, I'm acutely aware of the problems that have beset public transport since the start of the pandemic. The continued reduction in patronage and changes in travel demands, together with other pressures such as bus driver shortages, continue to create great strain on the sector. The Council continues to support the county's public transport network with new and varied contracts arranged where necessary to sustain previously commercial services and concessionary fares to to operators which were maintained at pre-pandemic levels except for a proportionate temporary adjustment reflecting the temporary reduction in services from January-February 2021. School transport forms a major part of our transport work, and during 2021-22, approximately 6,500 pupils received free travel to school from County Durham, with a further 3,000 pupils travelling under the non-statutory concessionary schemes. Despite the pandemic and low levels of patronage, information has been as important as ever to those using the network. The Council has continued to provide a comprehensive range of passenger information, including maintaining printed timetable displays at over 2,800 bus stops. The report illustrates well the breadth of work carried out by the Council in relation to passenger transport, and this should be recognised. Special thanks go from me to the staff team who have and continue to work tirelessly to keep our public transport network functioning. In doing so, I'm happy to propose that Cabinet approve the content of this report.
Thank you. The recommendation is for Cabinet to note the report. Therefore, we don't require a seconder. However, is there anyone else wishing to speak on it? No? Can we note the report, please? Okay, I can confirm the report is noted. Item 10, the County Durham Pound project update. Can I ask Paul Darby, Corporate Director of Resources, to present the report, please?
Thank you, Chair. Paul Darby, Corporate Director Resources. On the 13th of January 2021, Cabinet considered a report on social value and wealth building and established the concept of the Durham Pound. A range of actions were agreed to take forward with partners in those reports. This report provides Cabinet with an update on the implementation of those actions and the progress made with embedding social value into our procurement practices and strategic planning arrangements. The report focuses on the work of the Durham Pound Partnership, which brings together the main public sector anchor institutions right across County Durham, together with Northumbrian Water. Appendix 2 provides a detailed overview of the Durham Pound initiative, and at paragraph 10 we have summarised the key outcomes that have been delivered or are expected to be delivered, subject to Cabinet endorsement of the proposals set out in this report, which includes the signing of a statement of intent along with the partners involved in the Durham Pound initiative. In terms of the actions being taken with partners, including the outcome of the spend analysis, promotional activity and sharing of best practice through locally established knowledge hubs, this is all set out in detail in the covering report. The overarching aim of the partnership is to promote local community wealth building and good practice in County Durham. There are some examples of good social value outcomes levered from this initiative set out in the report, including investment in apprenticeships. It's important to note that the work of the Durham Pound complements and is aligned to the work on the Inclusive Economic Strategy and the Poverty Strategy and Action Plan. These clear links and opportunities to join up these approaches are being taken. The report is largely for information and to raise awareness of what is sector-leading activity in this area, and the recommendations are set out at paragraph 12.
Thanks, Paul. Can I invite Councillor Susan MacDonald, Cabinet Portfolio Holder for Digital and Customer Services, to speak to the report, please?
Thank you, Chair. And can I thank Paul and his team for preparing this report for Cabinet today. And in particular, I'd like to thank Darren Nowd, our Head of Procurement, Sales and Business Services, who's been instrumental in driving forward this agenda, both locally and nationally. Our work on social value and community wealth building and on the County Durham Pound project is truly sector-leading. Social value is about considering the economic, social and environmental benefits for our communities when we make decisions on how contracts are awarded and our budgets are invested. When we engage a contractor, factors such as their environmental policies, apprenticeship programmes and community outreach work are now taken into account, alongside the considerations we make such as quality, price and timescales for delivery. Wealth building, meanwhile, is all about working with residents, businesses and partner organisations to create and retain wealth within our communities in County Durham. This could be through promoting locally owned and socially minded enterprises, establishing local supply chains, or managing assets to allow communities greater control of buildings and land in their area. The report sets out some of the fantastic things we're doing in terms of both social value and community wealth building. It exemplifies the power of bringing together public and private sector organisations. And as members will see, the 12 organisations that have worked together so far have almost £1 billion of collective spending power each year. And we've now got some momentum. There is a clear collective commitment to building on the work to date and the ultimate shared goal of ensuring our collective spend benefits our residents and local businesses as much as possible. Of course, over the last few years, we've all faced immense challenges. However, the work we're doing through the County Durham Pound project is all about helping the recovery from the pandemic and reinvesting in the County Durham economy and supply chain as much as possible. Together, we have significant spending power, and through the County Durham Pound project, we're able to identify expenditure that could be retained locally, and this in turn can only represent opportunities for our residents and county businesses. This is particularly important as we collectively face the challenges posed by inflation and the squeeze on the cost of living. The fact that our partners are committed to signing the Statement of Intent is a clear indication of their commitment to continuing this important work. With that, Chair, I move that the Cabinet note the report and agree the recommendations as set out in paragraph, whatever it is. Sorry. Thank you.
Thanks, Susan. Can I invite Councillor Elizabeth Scott, Cabinet Portfolio Holder for Economy and Partnerships, to speak to the report, please?
Thanks, Chair. Can I also extend my thanks to Paul and his team for bringing this report forward and acknowledge both the progress that has been made in embedding social value and community wealth building considerations into our procurement processes, and also the leadership of the Council's procurement team has demonstrated in sharing our best practice and helping others embrace this agenda. We can be proud of the progress that has been made, but as ever, there remains lots more that can be done. I hope the work with the 12 partners as set out in this report is only the start of a long-term and sustained focus on this agenda, and that this approach is embraced by all contractors and suppliers too. Signing the Statement of Intent is a formal commitment to this important aspect of our work, and I fully support and endorse the proposals as set out in the report. With that, Chair, I'm happy to second.
Thank you. Is there anyone else wishing to speak to this report? Okay, can we agree the report and its recommendations? Agreed. Okay, I can confirm that the recommendations are agreed. Item 11, maintain schools budget plans and permission to set a deficit budget 2022-23. Can I ask Paul Darby, Corporate Director of Resources, to present the report, please?
Thank you, Chair. Paul Darby, Corporate Director of Resources. This report does set out for members information details of the initial budget plans for our maintained schools for the current year, including an overview of the planned use of retained balances to balance those budgets, and details of those schools who have requested and been given permission to set a licensed deficit budget in the current year. The report also sets out details of the significant unbudgeted budget pressures being faced by our maintained schools and the impact this is having on their forecast of outturn. A licensed deficit budget is a position where the school's expenditure in the year exceeds its income and any reserves it has available to it. At sections 15 to 26 of the report, I provide an overview of the school's budget setting processes and the role of the authority in this regard. At sections 27 to 33, we provide an overview of the 21-22 outturn for our maintained schools, where collectively schools' retained balances increased by £2 million last year as a result of the receipt of additional COVID-19 funding and reduced operating costs. At the 31st of March 22, there were 7 schools with deficit balances carried over to the current year, totalling £3.689 million. And for comparison purposes, at the 31st of March 21, there were 5 schools with deficit balances totalling £3.722 million. Of the 7 schools with deficit balances at the end of March 22, 5 have set balanced budgets for 22-23, where they will fully be recovering their deficit at the end of last financial year, and the remaining 2 have had to be granted a licensed deficit. Details of the schools that have been granted licensed deficits budgets are set out at sections 37 and 38. Wellfield has once again been required to set an in-year surplus budget to continue the path of paying back the deficit accumulated. DCBC, which formed part of the Durham Federation before it was disbanded, and the Findoon site closed for education purposes was subject to an earlier report on the agenda today. At paragraph 35, there's a table summarising the original budget plan set by our maintained schools for each phase and the forecast use of and estimated closing balances for each of those schools at the 31st of March 23. The initial budgets have been agreed by the government bodies, and members will see that in setting the budgets, our schools were budgeting this year to use £7.3 million of their balances. This is not an unusual position at this stage, with schools having not undertaken restructuring exercises. What is different this year is the significant volatility in terms of inflationary pressures on those schools' budgets, and an initial forecast has been undertaken of the impact this year. The forecast outturn this year is set out at paragraphs 39 to 41 and indicates a significant deterioration in the financial outlook for our schools as a result of the expected teachers' pay award, non-teaching staff pay award and price inflation, most notably energy price inflation. At this stage, the use of retained balances is expected to more than double to around £17 million this year. Without corrective action, many more schools will find it difficult to balance their budgets next year, and the schools finance team will continue to work with colleagues in Children and Young People Services and with school leadership teams to update these forecasts across the coming year and reflect on any further government announcements in terms of additional funding. With that, Chair, the recommendations are set out at paragraph 11, which are for Cabinet to note the budget plans and the action taken in terms of agreeing licence deficit for the two schools outlined in the report.
Okay, thanks, Paul. Can I invite Councillor Richard Bell, Deputy Leader and Cabinet Portfolio Holder for Finance, to speak to the report, please?
Thank you, Chair. I would ask Cabinet to note the report as tabled and in doing so acknowledge the action taken by the Director of Resources and his team in supporting our maintained schools to set their initial budgets for 22-23 and the work undertaken to prepare an initial updated forecast of outturn. The report describes that 7 schools had a deficit balance on 31st of March 22, but that 5 of these have set budgets that created an in-year surplus to fully recover the position by 31st of March 23. The report details the 2 schools where Paul, in his role as Chief Finance Section 151 Officer, has exercised his delegated powers to agree a licensed deficit budget, namely Durham Community Business College, already discussed at item 4, and Wellfield, and I am content that the reasons for doing so are clear and well documented in the report. The report provides a forecast of outturn for our maintained schools this year, where the same reasons driving the Council's overspend, a combination of higher than budgeted pay awards and inflationary pressures on energy and other contracted services, are manifesting themselves in schools and resulting in a forecasted significant increase in the utilisation of retained schools' balances, if, as is expected, no further funding is to be made available this year. If unsupported, many schools will face significant challenges in setting balanced budgets, both maintained and academy schools. I have highlighted this issue in my letter to the new Prime Minister and Chancellor, which I outlined earlier. We must continue to support, but also challenge our schools to properly manage their budgets and ensure that school leadership teams, including their governing bodies, are living within their means and ensuring that they balance the books, which can mean difficult decisions having to be made. With that, Chair, I propose that Cabinet notes the report.
Thank you. The recommendation is for Cabinet to note the report, therefore we don't require a formal seconder. However, is there anyone wishing to speak to this report? No. Can we note the report? Okay, I can confirm the report is noted. Item 12 is any other business. I have not been notified of any other business for this meeting, so I'd like to thank everyone for taking part and those members of the public and media who have watched the meeting online. That concludes the business for this meeting.